you a little bitch always being passive aggressive? Not comfortable with speaking your mind? Are you a people pleaser afraid of conflicts? Do you think you are empathetic towards what others are feeling and don't want to hurt them? In this episode, I will talk about the INFP characteristic of being sensitive. What I mean by that is that as INFPs, we tend to be sensitive towards others' emotions and thoughts, or at least we think that we do. We care a lot to not upset others through our actions because using our imaginative minds, we tend to imagine the different consequences of our actions and conversations. Like, for example, before we say something to a friend, we will think, will my words hurt or upset that friend? Or we would actively put ourselves into their shoes to see how we would react if we say that certain thing to ourselves. Looking at this characteristic, I think it describes me quite well. I tend to care a lot about what other people might react when I do something. I don't want to cause any unpleasant scenarios and arguments, and I just want everyone to live harmoniously. And if there are any hard feelings, let's just, suck it up and not talk about it and not fight over it. Give everyone space and some peace and quiet and just internalize the whole conflict, okay? I think this is very true for me because, for example, when my friends do certain actions that I don't like, I would tend to just not tell them. And maybe part of the reason is that I think they wouldn't understand, or they might take it in a harsh way. Or at least I would think that they will take it in a harsh way. Even if it is just, can you please stop doing that? But because if I were in their position, I would think they might feel hurt somehow. I mean, I'm kind of just being emotionally sensitive, right? A lot of the times, these hard feelings and grudges will build up inside my own head. Sometimes they would dissipate after a while. Sometimes they get internalized. Sometimes it might develop deeper, and I would dwell on them. One of the strengths of being sensitive as an INFP is that we are empathetic and cautious of others' emotions and treat everyone delicately so we don't hurt them. We want to create a peaceful world where people could just discuss the problems calmly rather than emotionally argue about it, which I tend to think nothing good would come out of it. The best way is to solve every problem peacefully, or just talk about all these feelings that we have without being emotional, which is very hard in reality because when you talk about the things you care about, you naturally become emotionally invested in that situation. So yeah, I guess with this strength of being sensitive, I guess that allows INFPs to become peacemakers. So with this strength of being emotionally sensitive, we often become the good guys, trying our best to not trigger people because we know it can be hurtful. We also are quite empathetic, or we appear to be quite empathetic, even if we don't really feel the other person's feeling. But even for others, I think they would think that we are quite understanding, and we can also be good listeners because of this. I tend to think that I'm a good listener because it seems like people like coming to me to talk about their problems, or maybe I just sit there and listen so they become quite comfortable, spilling their emotions. So I guess in a way we tend to be some sort of therapists where we are curious about how others are feeling. Oftentimes, I am consciously detecting whether someone is angry or sad or happy just by picking up on these subtle cues and facial expressions. Sometimes I might be wrong about the cues I'm picking up. I'm quite curious about all these things, but sometimes I'm just too shy to ask that person. But that's because, I worry that asking might also hurt that person. So that's quite conflicting as well. So the weakness of being too emotionally sensitive is that I am quite conflict adverse. Conflicts makes me stressful. I mean, that can be a good thing because that creates a more harmonious world, but in a way, being conflict adverse also means you fear conflict and you're scared of arguments. Part of the reason is because I fear, losing the people that I care about. And because of that, I don't talk about my own feelings and hide them, and sometimes I get walked all over. We become people pleasers to avoid conflict. Part of the reason might be because we want to get accepted by other people. And I tend to think that conflict creates division in people, which in turn causes me to not be accepted by others. We don't want to be rejected because we are different from other people. I try not to show my emotions when I feel offended. That might lead to a lot of negativity building up in my own system, and slowly it might get leaked out through my facial expressions or through my movements and words. It might come up as a form of passive aggressiveness, which I have been accused of. So when I was with my ex-girlfriend, I would sometimes have these unhappy heart feelings triggered by what she had said or done, and I would just keep it to myself and I wouldn't tell her. Even after a few days have passed, I would kind of still be passive aggressive about it, and she would be like, "What's wrong with you?" But I would be very hesitant to let it out because I don't want to hurt her. Kind of like a little bitch, right? That is sometimes not very healthy in certain relationships because you should be open in a relationship so at least they know what you're thinking of and, mutually work on the problem instead of expecting her to read your mind. You might be trying to internalize your grudge and hoping that they would understand you automatically because you somehow put yourself into their shoes and you expect they would also pick up on your emotional cues and they should be asking you about all these questions of how you're feeling and, pamper you or whatever. But that doesn't happen because you don't share what you're thinking, because you're just too scared to go into a conflict. I guess going back to why I am like this, one of the reasons why I get this conflict adverse personality might be down to my own upbringing. One of the reasons I don't like conflict might be because my mom always gets triggered about everything at home. A lot of the nights she would be like getting angry for the smallest of things and yelling to my dad and at me about things which I don't think is worth being angry about at all, which creates an unharmonious environment at home. I guess I just don't want to become like that, so I would just tend to keep all the unhappy feelings to myself and not tell people because I would imagine how suffering it is that people have to take that anger from me, just as how I have to take that anger and negativity from my mom. But still, one important lesson I am trying to learn is to voice out my own feelings and opinions firmly and care less about what others might be thinking. While we are empathetic towards other people, our imaginations of how others might react to our actions and words might be wrong. I might think that me voicing out my own feeling might cause the other person to become angry, but that might not be the case. Because if we don't voice out our own opinions and feelings, it will ultimately hurt yourself. And you can forever be stuck and you can't get what you want. Or the people who you are scared to voice your opinions to might also be confused about what you want as well. Maybe they want to help you, but without telling them what you want, they can't find the best way to help you. So yeah, learning to embrace disagreements and conflict and speaking my mind is something that is important for INFPs to work on, I guess. So yeah, all you INFPs out there, what did you think about this trait of being emotionally sensitive, being empathetic, being conflict adverse? Do you struggle with this trait of yours? Or do you find it a very wonderful tool to interact with people? And for non-INFPs, if you have ever interacted with INFPs who are conflict averse, who like to keep things to themselves, or is always, a little bitch, being passive aggressive, I would like to know your thoughts on this. I would like to know your experiences in dealing with them. So yeah, as always, thanks for watching.